Well, hello, fellow shit shows. This is Barb Mangle from Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, and it looks like nobody's making it live today, which is unfortunate, but I get it. It's 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, Eastern time, and 11 a.m. on a Monday Pacific time. But hopefully, you'll get something out of watching the replay. I did intend for this to be somewhat interactive, so obviously, that is not going to happen. But I do have a bunch of content that is already available for you. It's a whole list of episodes of my podcast about keeping the focus on yourself and also a handout for how to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint presentation right now so that we can get on our way. So the name of this workshop is Stop Over Giving, Repair Your Life from the Inside Out. And this is especially for shit shows, though I do this presentation for other audiences as well. And so what I have done here is sort of included some of my philosophy of why we are overgivers. I'm going to give you a little bit about my story briefly, but here's what we're going to cover. Just to kind of make sure that you're in the right place. If this is you, I'll ask some questions about that. I'm going to share some unhealthy patterns for overgivers. Then we're going to talk about how to repair your life from the inside out and what the fuck does that mean. And then, of course, well, boundaries review. So this is where I was going to get some input from the audience. Obviously, we won't be doing that. And then I'm going to teach you about boundaries, the what, the why, the where and when, and the how. So first, a little bit about me. I am a sociologist by training. I have a master's degree in sociology with a research background. I worked at Yale University for 19 years. I was still at Yale when I got into recovery. And I was astonished at how much me alone being in recovery, and especially the part about building boundaries, impacted my entire team. There was a ripple effect on my team. And it was like, wait a minute, none of them are in recovery. It's just me. And so it's really amazing that when one person in a group changes the dynamics of their interactions with other people, the impact that it can have on others. And so I really want for other people to have the kind of freedoms that I've had. The turning point for me was that in 2015, at the age of 52, I hit a codependent bottom. This happened when I invited my friend Dan, who was a homeless person who I met through church, to stay at my home overnight during a snowstorm, which I now know is not normal. And he did. And then I invited him another time and another time. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And I soon felt trapped in my own home. He was an addict and an alcoholic. And on reflection, I think he may have also had some kind of a personality disorder because this guy fucked with my head in a way that nobody else ever had before. And I was talking about him in therapy. And in mid-sentence, I stopped and went, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? And she was like, yes. So I don't know what I Googled, but I was looking for Al-Anon and I came across the word codependent, which was a shocker for me because even though I had been in therapy since I was fucking 15, so that's 37 years, not continuous, but close. I got introduced to the whole self-help genre at like 24. So I read a gajillion self-help books. I've done workshops in physical fitness and health and nutrition and spiritual groups, support groups and workbooks and retreats and like you name it. And I'm like, how did I not know about this word codependent? So I started going to CODA. Very quickly got into ACA. That's the program for me. A year later, got into Overeaters Anonymous. So I've been in ACA for 9 years as of this past April and abstinent in my food program of OA for 8 years this past April. And I'm down over 100 pounds from my top weight. And for me, the 12 steps are where it's at because all that other stuff that I did, the way I think of it is it scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life and recovery melted the iceberg. So that was a huge turning point for me. And the impact was just astonishing. I think one of the things that people can most relate to is that I had never had a healthy romantic relationship. I had a gigantically long string of dysfunctional relationships. And I'm now in the first and only healthy romantic relationship I've ever had. I've been with my sweetheart for 5.5 years, and it has everything to do with my healthy boundaries. One of the things that attracted me the most to him was that he had healthy boundaries. And that means that we actually let each other know what's okay and what's not okay. And when something bothers us, we bring it up immediately. We don't let shit fester and then explode and have knockdown, drag out fights, which is like the story of my life before that. I also learned a lot of things about myself, like, and I learned how to communicate clearly and effectively, like directly with people. That was not a thing that we did in my family. That has everything to do with building healthy boundaries. I was always the kind of person who I felt like I liked myself and had high self-esteem, but recovery showed me I did not love myself and I didn't feel worthy. I also knew that I didn't trust myself. And when I look back at like how did I build self-trust, self-love, and self-worth, it really had to do with the boundary building process. And so those are like reasons number 5,662, 63, and 64 of why I became a boundaries coach, because I want that shit for other people. This is a mission for me. This is not just a job. I especially want this for professional women like former me, so that they can stop looking like they have it together on the outside and be falling apart on the inside and have the insides match the outside. So this is not just a job for me. This is a mission, because the amount of control that I have over my life that I had no idea was possible, the amount of freedom, especially freedom of choice, especially freedom of choice of what I think, is just astonishing. And then there's also the enormous amount of energy that I have in my life, because I'm not fucking drained all the time from doing things for other people and various other things that drained me. So, in my opinion, the reason that professional women in particular struggle with saying no is that we care way more what other people think than what we think. And the reason I say that is that when I reflect back at what was the shift that I made that caused me to go from 50 something years of no boundaries to having such healthy boundaries that I now have a coaching and consulting practice built on teaching people how to have healthy boundaries, it's that I came to care more what I think of me than what other people do. And this doesn't mean I don't care at all what others think of me. Of course I do. I'm a human and also a former people pleaser. What it means is that I used to be willing to throw my integrity out the window because I wanted your approval. I didn't know that I was doing that. I didn't know I was motivated by people's approval. Recovery taught me that. I'm no longer willing to throw my integrity out the window. I'm no longer willing to say yes to things I really don't want to do. I'm no longer willing to act like I like things that I don't like. I'm no longer willing to act like things are okay with me when they're not. I'm no longer willing to say I'm fine when I'm not. And so if me telling the truth about those things causes someone to disapprove of me, I can live with it. You know why? Because I approve of me now, because I'm living in alignment with my values, with my higher power and my highest good. So I want that for other people. And so learning to say no is really all about taking the journey to come to care more what you think of yourself than what other people do. And if you think that's not possible for you, I'm here to show you that it is possible. Okay. So, I was going to ask, was there a time that you did something you really didn't want to do and later regretted it? And then have you type why in the chat so you could identify with me and the other people in the room? Obviously, we can't do that. And then just some other things about if you're watching this, you're probably saying yes when you really want to say no. And maybe you're even saying no to things you actually want to do, either because you're afraid that people are going to judge you, or maybe you just don't have time because you're so busy doing stuff for other people. Perhaps you, like I was before, I looked on the outside like I had it together, but meanwhile, I was a complete mess, especially in the relationship department. I barely held it together a lot of times. This is why I drank so heavily and smoked so much weed and was into the food and all that. You're probably overcommitted and maybe even drained of energy because you're constantly doing things for other people and always like scheming about how the hell you're going to get all this stuff done. Maybe you are obsessed with what other people are thinking, what they're doing, maybe what they're not doing, what they're saying, and especially what they're thinking and saying about you or what they should be doing and should not be doing. You're probably pretending that things are okay with you when they're not, or that you're fine when you're not, like I was. And if you've done any of these things, I was going to ask you if you've done any of them at least 10 times in the last year, type me in the chat. Obviously, that's not going to work here, but I'm guessing if you're still watching, you identify with this stuff. And that means you probably also identify with this. You want time to slow down and have fun and play and have leisure and relax and pursue things that enjoy you. You probably really want to stop giving such a shit about what other people think of you. You probably really long to have a calm confidence when you set limits with people and say no to them. You probably want to be able to say things just sort of off the cuff, like, that doesn't work for me, without shitting your pants. And you probably long to not do things you really don't like doing. One of the examples I give all the time is I've been a Dallas Cowboys fan twice. I've been a New England Patriots fan. I've been a New York Giants fan. Meanwhile, I don't give a shit about football. I thought I was being a good girlfriend by participating in that stuff. I don't care about that. You probably really would like the idea of accepting help and even asking for help from other people. I know that when I got in recovery and I started doing, well, even when I thought about asking for help, I literally felt like I was going to die inside. And it was like a trauma response. It caused like all these alarms to go off inside. And now I'm really good at asking for help. And you probably also want to feel like you belong. You want to feel like just being you is enough. And you do not have to go over the top to feel like it's okay for you to be there and to participate. You don't want to feel like you have to earn your place. If this is all you, you were in the right place, keep watching. You're also probably afraid to be, let me just go on. You're afraid to be seen as rude or mean. That's what we often think it means that people will think about us when we set boundaries. You don't want to be seen as a dick. You don't want to be seen as weak. That might be why you don't want to ask for help. I personally was afraid to be seen as a bad person. And to me, a bad person was someone who says no or is just unhelpful. And of course, you want to be seen as kind, as giving and reliable and trustworthy and honest and all those sorts of things. And so because of these things that you're afraid to be seen as and want to be seen as, you don't set limits with people. You don't say no when you really want to. You don't let people know when things are not okay with you. You don't ask for help. And even if you do every once in a while, you have a really hard time accepting it. So that's why we're here today. So I have been a boundaries coach for 4 years. So I've coached many, many people, and I've also been in recovery for a long time and work a lot on boundaries and recovery with my fellow travelers and with my sponsees. I've done workshops for the ACA World Service Organization a couple of times with hundreds of participants. And there are 4 patterns that I have seen for overgivers. So one is that we have a misplaced focus. I'm going to go into detail about each one of these in a few moments. Another, excessive independence. Like, nope, I'm good. I don't need anybody. Self-imposed limitations. We believe things, especially about ourselves, but also about the world, that are just bullshit. And we engage in really ineffective communication. I mean, this was what I learned in my family. You know, you don't talk directly to the people that you have a problem with, you talk to everybody around them. So let me go into detail about what this means. So your misplaced focus is on others. So you're focused on other people and what they're doing, or maybe what they're not doing, what they're thinking and saying, especially what they're thinking and saying about you. what they need. So I was always like, what does he need? What does she need? What do they need? What does the organization need? What does the situation need? And this is exhausting. And it's exhausting because you can't control all that stuff out there. And so all your energy is going out, 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 out. And you can't have the kind of impact that you could have if your energy was focused in here, where you actually can make a difference. And then the next one is excessive independence. So what this means is you do not ask for or accept help from other people. So you feel like you have to do everything yourself. Even when people offer it for you, you're like, no, I'm good. I got this. It's fine. You probably push yourself to make sure you can get all the stuff done because you want people to think that they can rely on you and depend on you. And you're going to stay up all night to get that thing done because you said you were going to do it, even though it's supposed to be a team project and you've taken on 98% of it yourself. You're overly responsible. So you take responsibility for things that really are not in your purview. So the way that we talk about in the workplace is you're not staying in your lane. This is exhausting because you have this expectation of yourself that you can accomplish like a world of tasks that are probably meant for a team, and you won't ask for and accept help from others, and it's just fucking exhausting. And then the third one is self-imposed limitations. This is huge, and I'm barely going to scratch the surface with this. So usually people who are givers have wildly unrealistic expectations of themselves, other people, and the world. So another way to say that is we do not accept what is. We fight against what is. We think things should be a certain way. We have victim mentality. This was for me the biggest paradigm shift of my recovery. I had no idea that I had victim mentality. I mean, I think most people that have it don't know it until they do. And so this is characterized by lots of if only thinking, like, if only he would just blah, 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 then everything would be okay. It's characterized by complaining. So that means we're acting like we have nothing to do with it. It's characterized by blaming. We feel the need to place blame all the time. And this is a mentality that we can change. We often have victim mentality because we were victimized in some capacity. So it came from somewhere. It served us because we made it out of childhood as adults, but it's not serving us anymore. We have black and white thinking. So things are either good or bad. I either did it or I didn't do it. Or, I'm successful or I'm not, or I'm flawed or I'm awesome. And we pretend, sometimes we even pretend to ourselves. We pretend that things are okay when they're not okay. We pretend that we're fine. We pretend that we have more money than we actually do. We pretend we have all experience. We pretend we know things that we don't. Like, this was the story of my life. And yet I thought I was an honest woman of integrity. You also suffer from the belief that if you just beat yourself up enough, then you will turn into a better person. Now, maybe you don't like consciously believe that, but if you are like me and you've been beating the shit out of yourself for years, then obviously on some level you think that's going to work, that's going to somehow turn you into a better person. And what's crazy about me is, as I said earlier, I always felt like I had high self-esteem. When I got in recovery, I realized I was almost like scanning the horizon at all times. Like, where can I beat the shit out of myself? And I wasn't even aware that I did that. And we also believe that it is somehow hurtful to other people to set limits with them. So many of my clients are like, oh, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Meanwhile, you've been hurting your own feelings probably for decades. And I love Brooke Castillo from Life Coach School says, listen, if somebody's going to be disappointed, it shouldn't be you. Well, I say if somebody's feelings must be hurt, it shouldn't be you. Now, I'm not saying purposely hurt other people's feelings, but if you keep taking the hit, like, you're the only one that can do something about that. But if you start allowing other people to get their feelings hurt instead of you, your life is going to improve immeasurably. And you're distributing those hurts out to many other people instead of taking them all on yourself. So the fourth one is ineffective communication. This is, was the story of my life. So I never communicated directly with the person that I had difficulty with. So when I was working at Yale, I gossiped about my boss behind her back. I never went to her and said, "Hey, this isn't really working. Can we try something different?" So when you do that, you're creating more chaos. And for me, I also realized when I stopped gossiping about her and talking about her behind her back, my resentment went down by like, I don't know, 90%. You probably expect people should know things. Here's the thing. If people should know things, they would know them. So even if you've told them 40 times, somehow they're not retaining it. Stop taking it personally. Stop taking it as a personal affront and come right out and tell them. Stop trying to read other people's minds and assume you know what they're going to do or what they're going to say or what their motives are or why they did something or what they meant by something, and come right out and ask them. And then stop expecting people to read your mind. This is part of the should know thing. Like come right out and say that doesn't work for me. So murky communication covers so many things. So this means things like implying, beating around the bush, and expecting people to figure out what you mean. So instead, you come right out and say, please don't put that there. And then triangulation. So what we often do is rather than going to the person that we have a difficulty with, we talk to people around them and we create triangles, which are often referred to as the drama triangle. Or sometimes the victim triangle. So if you're not familiar with that, the drama triangle is a dysfunctional pattern of communication. Everybody engages in it from time to time, but adult children practically live in it, and we bebop around the triangle. So we've got victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And so we go back and forth, and you don't need three people to be in a triangle. You can be in a triangle with yourself, or you can be in a triangle with other people because you go back and forth between those positions. And what we want is to go into what David Emerald calls the empowerment dynamic instead of the victim triangle. So in the empowerment dynamic, instead of a victim, we have a creator. Instead of a rescuer, we have a coach. And instead of a persecutor, we have, oh my God, it begins with a C. I'm forgetting the name of it. I can't remember what it is. But it's not a persecutor. All right. So this is also exhausting because you don't like when you say, I want this, and they go, okay, the communication is over. But when you're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do I want to do? Are you sure you want to do that? It's just ridiculous amount of communication. So there is one skill, you're going to be shocked to hear this, that can dismantle all these patterns, and that is boundaries. So this was another audience participation thing. I was going to ask for someone to be willing to share a time when they overgave, and then hopefully we would use that example throughout. But since that's not happening, we're going to move on. So the thing about building boundaries is that you must focus on yourself. So boundaries are about you and for you. So the way I think of it is my boundaries are for me, they're not against you. So I'm doing this for me, and I'm the one doing it. I'm the one changing my behavior. So I have got to focus on myself. So that is how we're going to repair our lives from the inside out. This is an inside job. We're focusing on ourselves. So there is a whole list of podcast episodes about how to keep the focus on yourself. There's also a worksheet on how to do that. But here's the gist of it. So first you want to ask yourself, what about me? What do I want or need here? I had no fucking idea. I never even asked myself. It was just like, what does this situation need? What does he need? What do they need? What does the organization need? What does the cause need? And there was never any consideration. Now, in the beginning, when you start asking yourself, well, first of all, you're not going to remember in the beginning. Then when you do start asking yourself, you're probably not going to be able to give it to yourself, but you still keep asking because eventually you will be able to be like, huh, I really would like to take the day off, or I really would like to bow out of that committee. And then the beautiful question from 12-step recovery, what's my part? What if I have a long-standing dynamic, especially if it occurs in multiple areas of my life? I'm the common denominator. So what's my part in it? And this is info, not ammo. This is information to learn, integrate, and grow from. It's not ammunition to beat the shit out of yourself. Because when you beat the shit out of yourself, you just end up battered and bruised. And that is no place from which to grow and change. So when we ask, what's my part in it? It's like basically saying, okay, what could I do differently in the future? And then another is this my business? Like, I cannot tell you how much I was in other people's business. I was giving unsolicited advice constantly. I was running in to rescue, fix, and save other people. Sometimes people who didn't even perceive their situations as needing help. And then, of course, because I was an overgiver, I was attracting overtakers. And then I would get resentful of them, even though I set up the dynamic from the beginning. So when I stay in my own business, like, oh my God, that's so much more energizing because I'm just living the one life, mine. And then also, whose feelings are these? Am I feeling your feelings? Or are these really my feelings? Like, I get to just deal with my feelings. And then, speaking of just dealing with my feelings, it's not my job to manage your feelings. If you are upset, you get to be upset. If you are grieving, you get to grieve. It's not my job to fix your feelings or to get you to feel better about yourself. So we need to stay in our own feelings and manage our own feelings and let other people manage theirs. And then ask yourself, am I taking good care of myself? And this is in bold and with capital letters, because if you take nothing else away from this, the best way to keep the focus on yourself is to take really good care of yourself. And I want to give an example. So a couple months ago, maybe it was just a few weeks ago, I'm not sure. There was a whole fiasco where flights were canceled all over because of some technical thing that happened. And I have a client who is an event planner, and she planned a basketball tournament with kids from a whole bunch of states. And they were at the tournament when the shit hit the fan with the airports and the flights. So she had to go through the process of finding flights for all of these kids to go back to their home states. And when she got home, she messaged me and she said, that went so much better than I could have imagined. Self-care is key. And I said, it's amazing, amazing what you can withstand when you take good care of yourself. So here's how I think about that. Instead of trying to pour from an empty cup, which is what I did my entire life, I've learned that I want to pour from the overflow so that there's always something in my cup. It never gets close to empty. And the only way to have an overflow is if you fill your cup first. So if you've ever flown on an airplane, you know what they say. When the oxygen mask pops down, put it on yourself first, because you can't help those other people if you're passed out. So taking really good care of yourself is not selfish. And I don't mean things like getting your hair cut and getting your nails painted. I mean consistently doing things that bring you energy. For me personally, it's lots of conscious contact with my higher power. So I have a whole prayer routine. I meditate twice a day. I journal. I say affirmations. I have daily readers. I have visual like pictures that I look at and that sort of thing. So taking really good care of you is like the best way to keep the focus on yourself. So if you get nothing else from me, take really good care of yourself. It's amazing what you can withstand when you take good care of yourself. And all of this is energizing. So this changes the patterns from the inside out. So instead of misplaced focus, we have empowered self-focus. We're focusing on what we can control. Instead of excessive independence, we have healthy interdependence. We have balanced relationships where we actually give and take with other people. Instead of having misplaced beliefs and misconceptions about ourselves, we have empowering beliefs like I am Flossom. This is info, not ammo. I have realistic expectations of myself and other people in the world and the world. And instead of having indirect communication, we have clear and direct communication with the people that are involved in the situation. So when we do all of these things, we have so much more control over our lives. You're not going to believe how much more control you have over your life. You can't even conceive of how much more control you can have over your life if you don't have healthy boundaries. You're going to have much more balanced relationship. It's not going to be just give, 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 and then take, 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 take from those other people. It's going to be give and take. You're going to be able to give to others in a way that's sustainable, whether that's in the world of recovery or, donating to charitable causes in terms of like, nonprofit organizations, that sort of thing. But you're not going to have the kind of relationships where you're constantly giving and drained all the time. Instead of just beating the shit out of yourself, you're going to start looking at things with curiosity. And I think that's curiosity is so good because it's neutral. It's also a wonderful stance to take when you're dealing with other people. Instead of going like, here we go. When there's someone that irritates you, like look at this situation with curiosity. Like, what is going on here? And maybe you'll get the answer and maybe you won't, but also like, how might I shift this dynamic? What might I do differently on my end? And you're so much more likely to get your needs met when you learn to communicate clearly and directly. You're focused on yourself and you have empowering beliefs and you're not so fucking independent. And of course, all of these things are going to lead to a massive increase on energy on your part. All right, so now it's time to learn about boundaries. So what are boundaries? The way that I think of them is that there are standards that you have for your life, hopefully that you live up to. They're limits for yourself and they're limits for other people. So for example, health is one of my standards. I abused and neglected the shit out of myself for so long that health is really important to me now. I don't want to just take care of myself going forward. I'd like to make up for some of what I did in the past. So I have some limits for myself. I do not stay up until all hours of the night. I go to bed at 11 p.m. I plan and weigh and measure my food. I give myself time to to prepare and plan my meals. I have money set aside for things like meditation practice and yoga and that sort of thing. And then I have limits for others. So for example, I don't allow people to smoke in my house. I do not hang around people that drink. And if they started drinking, I would leave. I get to decide how I want to live my life. Why do boundaries matter? They're about our very identity and they're about belonging. So our identity is who do we define ourselves to be? Before I had healthy boundaries, there was an enormous amount of me that was up for negotiation. I didn't know where I ended and other people began. And learning how to build healthy boundaries helped me figure that out. In the beginning, I didn't know what my limits were because I was always saying yes. I was a fucking chameleon. Right. And so I had to make educated guesses and then set boundaries and be like, yeah, that works for me. That doesn't work for me. But our boundaries tell us where we end and other people begin, what's okay and what's not okay. And they give us a sense of belonging because when we're clear about our boundaries, about who we are and what's okay and what's not okay, what our like enthusiastic yeses are and our hell no's are, then we can find the places where we belong. The people who are our people can find us because they know who we are because we're the same person that we were yesterday. They define what's my responsibility and what's not my responsibility. I had a lot of lack of clarity about that. I made people responsible for things for like my feelings and approving of me. And I took responsibility for things that really belonged to other people, thus all the fixing, rescuing, and saving. They allow you to gain control over your life. You start by figuring out what matters to me, and then you start living in such a way that your life supports and promotes those things. And you start saying yes and no to things, and you'll be astonished at like the effect of doing that because you're so much more likely to get the things that you want when you say yes to things that you want and no things that you don't want. And then then people are like, okay, now that I'm getting a handle on what this boundaries things are, how do I know what my boundaries are? How do I know where to set them and when to set them? And it's based on what matters to you. You know your limits by what's important to you. And so the way that I coach my clients is I have them start by determining their top 5 values. I have an exercise I have them do. And they do that before we even get started coaching. And the reason for that is that these top values serve as guideposts. Like what are the boundaries? I'm going in this direction. I'm going towards health. They serve as guideposts. They help me decide what I need to do to support and promote my values. And you've decided ahead of time, this matters to me. And I'm so much more likely to follow through on something that I've decided ahead of time. I have these standards for my health. I don't just make decisions willy-nilly based on the food that's in front of me. I make decisions ahead of time. Like I don't eat these certain kinds of foods, right? I don't eat like a buffet's worth of food. I personally weigh and measure my food, and I know you may not, but that's an example I think most people can follow. So then people are like, okay, now I understand a little bit about what boundaries are. I have an idea of how I'm going to set them. What the hell do I do to set them? And then when people push back, how do I uphold those boundaries? What do I do about people's pushback behavior? So first you have to determine your limits. And then so I will say many boundaries we don't ever even discuss with other people. Many boundaries are just for us and not other people. These are the kinds of boundaries that we're communicating with other people. And one of the things I like to say to my clients is if you have a boundary and there's no consequence, it wasn't really a boundary. It was a hope or a wish. So I thought when I first started building boundaries that I could just say to somebody, hey, don't do that. And they would just not do it. That's not a boundary. That's a wish. That's a hope. That's a fantasy. Right. But if I say, hey, don't do that, and then they do it, then I have to counter, I have to do something. I have to change my behavior. I have to change the dynamic of my interaction with them. Otherwise, it's not a boundary. So what are the consequences? So I mentioned earlier, like people can't smoke in my house. So if somebody comes in my house and lights up, I've got to do something about it. So I have to actually follow through and say, hey, I asked you not to smoke in my house. I'm going to ask you to leave. Right. Or you need to put that out, or I'm going to ask you to leave. Right. So I have to actually do something. But if I say there's no smoking in my house and someone lights up and I don't do anything, then I get mad at them. That's not a boundary. That's a hope or a wish. So you have to actually follow through on it. So I'll give the example of my brother. I think a lot of people can identify with this. When I started building boundaries, I thought I could just say, hey, I don't really want to talk politics. And he'd be like, oh, okay. No, he's literally incapable. He lives and breathes and swims politics. And so I would say, yeah, just as a reminder, I don't really want to talk about this. Well, I'm the one who has the boundary about not talking politics. I can't change him into a human that doesn't talk politics. That's not a thing. I can't do that. But what I can do is I can change me. So I realized I need to spend way less time with him, and it needs to be way fewer and farther between. Now, I personally chose not to say anything. I could have said, hey, if you don't stop talking politics, I'm not going to come around as much anymore, and I'm not going to stay as long. But I was like, fuck it, I don't care that much. So I was astonished. Like, I didn't know that I didn't have to put up with this shit. I didn't know I didn't have to listen to him for 50 something years. I just took the onslaught of whatever he threw at me. And I didn't know that I didn't have to do that. At first, I thought, oh, I'm just going to say stop, and he's going to. And like, that's not like a lot of people, especially dysfunctional family members, they don't have it. They're not capable of that. So don't take it personally and decide, what am I going to do? So sometimes we need to get away from people physically. Sometimes it's just a matter of time, but you get to decide, like, what are you going to do? So don't do these things. So don't think, let's say that you work in this place and you're like, listen, I'm going to start volunteering at this animal shelter on Wednesdays. I'm happy to stay late any other day of the week, but I can't. And then they come and ask you, don't go, oh, I can't believe that he kept asking me to work on Wednesday when I told him not to, right? Or that I couldn't do it. Like, you're not doing anything. There's no boundary there. Or going to someone else and saying the same thing, like, that's not a boundary. Or stomping around and slamming doors, hoping that he's going to be like, what's the matter, Barb? And then go, oh, okay, let me change what I was going to do based on you stomping around. That's not a thing. Or just decide, all right, I told him what my boundary was and he didn't listen, so I'm gonna give up on the whole thing. Like, this is wishes and hopes. But what you could do, like, I was gonna get feedback from you guys, but since you're not here, I won't do that. But some ideas are, you communicate clearly and directly with the person and you say, as a reminder, I will now be volunteering at the animal shelter on Wednesdays and I'm no longer available on Wednesday nights. You'll have to get someone else to cover. I'm happy to come in any other night. You're going to focus on their behavior, not on their character. So you don't go around talking about the person and saying what an asshole they are. You directly address, I've asked you, I've told you I'm not going to be able to come in on Wednesday nights and you've repeatedly asked me. So please stop asking me. You don't say, why are you such an asshole or things like that. So you communicate directly with the person, you communicate clearly with the person, and you focus on their behavior, not on their character. So here are a whole bunch of tips for setting boundaries. So do this. Be prompt, not this, which is wait for the right time to come. It doesn't ever come. Do it as soon as you know what your boundary is, because it gives you relief and it's also respectful for them. And you're not like going like, oh my God, when is the right time going to come? It's not. So be polite instead of waiting until you explode. So there's no reason to be rude, but I think one of the reasons why people are rude when it comes to setting boundaries is they wait until they get pushed way past their limits and then they explode and it works. So they think, oh, that's what I have to do. I have to be a dick to set boundaries. No, you don't. Don't lie. So I know I used to always if I were setting a boundary and even in the beginning, I would just blame it on someone else. Like, oh, my boss won't let me, or I can't because I have to XYZ because of somebody else. Like, you get to own your responsibility for your own life and say, I'm not able to do that because I'll be working at that time. Not my boss is making me work. Don't apologize. You haven't done anything wrong by setting a boundary. And one of the patterns I see frequently is that we apologize for fucking everything. Stop apologizing. It's like you think you're apologizing for your very existence. You deserve to be here. You were born on purpose. You were meant to be here and you don't have to apologize. And you especially don't have to apologize for having boundaries, even if people try to make you feel like you should. Have a rule. So our boundaries are about us and for us, not about other people, but this makes it really clear that it's about you and not them. We don't want to make it about them. I'm setting my boundaries for me, not against you. It's to take care of me. You get to take care of yourself. Buy time. If you don't know what you want to say, then don't just say yes without pausing to think. Give yourself some time and say, hey, I'm going to have to think about it. And you may wonder why tip 1 is be prompt and tip 6 is buy time. Well, tip 1 is be prompt when you know what the answer is. Tip 6 is buy time when you don't know what you want to do. Or actually, it could be if you know that it's no, but you don't have it in you to say no right in the moment to their face, you can buy time and then come back to them either in person, via text, via voicemail, via email, and say, I'm going to have to decline. And then number 7 is give an alternative rather than saying yes to whatever they ask of you. So if they say, hey, can you chair this committee? You could say, yeah, I can't chair the committee, but I'm happy to be a member of the committee. So you give them some kind of an alternative. So if you are ever in New Haven, this has nothing to do with boundaries. This is about me and my hometown where I live now. You can find out what to do when you're in New Haven by going to infonewhaven.com. If you don't know this, New Haven is known as Pizza Town. We have I don't know how many pizza places here. We're known for our thin crust pizza. It's very similar to New York style pizza. Everybody raves about Pepe's and Sally's. Between the two of them, they're always voted as the top 2 pizza places, I think, in the world. However, you have to wait in line for fucking ever, no matter what time you go. And it's brick oven pizza, which means it gets that kind of black char on it. I like it okay, but I much prefer Nico's on Orange Street, because you can buy a whole pizza, but they also have tons of different kinds of slices that you can buy. And in New Haven, by the way, we cut our pizza like a pie, not in a grid. There are all kinds of free museums, many of which belong to Yale University. There's also the New Haven Museum. But if you only go to one place while you're in New Haven, I recommend that you go to the top of East Rock Park to the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, because from up there you can see the entire city and you can see Long Island Sound. And if you don't know what Long Island Sound is and why I'm describing a sound as something you can see, it's a body of water. I had a cousin from the Midwest go, why are you telling me that I can see a sound? So Long Island is a piece of New York that juts out into the Atlantic Ocean and kind of covers. So here's Connecticut and then Long Island Sound comes here. So it's ocean water in there, but we don't have big waves, but you can see all of that from the top of the park. And then I highly recommend doing a tour of Yale University. They do them every single day of the week. And it's also a tour of New Haven because Yale and New Haven grew up together. And then if you eat vegetarian, the best place to go is Claire's Cornucopia. She opened it in 1975 and she still runs it. Even if you're not vegetarian, you will find stuff that you like. They are famous for their amazing desserts, including vegan desserts. All right, thank you so much for your time. I hope that this is helping you to stop overgiving and learn to build your life, repair your life from the inside out.